Hey guys, welcome back to Computer Graphics 2 GRA-152. This week we're going to delve into creating our own kind of pop art style piece, kind of based off of and mimicking Andy Warhol's pop art style. A 1960s kind of master of his own time. This is one of his most famous pieces, the other one being the Campbell soup can piece. Again, pop art kind of was a nice way of artists trying to comment socially on the pop culture of the time. And so we're going to kind of do a piece that's similar. I'm going to give you a practice image that you can use. If you look, it's going to be this football practice image. You can download it to follow along if you wish, but ultimately, of course, I want kind of like the black and white to color photo project we just did last week. I would like for you to use your own photo that you want to use. That could be of yourself, that could be of a friend, a family member, your favorite celebrity, maybe a voice actor, maybe an artist, maybe a musician, whatever the case. The big thing that we want to make sure of, whatever image you choose for that person, that image needs to be a close-up shot of that person, right? So it does not need to include and should not include their full body. It needs to be really focused on their face. The other thing I'll recommend, or I'll say also that I would definitely mention, is that it needs to be a photograph. So it's not an illustration. It's not an animated figure. It needs to be a photograph of a real person. That unfortunately also means that it doesn't really work, at least for the style of art that we're trying to create. It doesn't really work well with pets or other types of animals, just because of the highlights, the midtones, and the shadows that are going on for the image. So whatever image you choose, just make sure that, again, it's a close-up shot. So first things first, download the first football practice image if you want to use that as you kind of go in. If you don't use the football practice image to kind of go alongside the tutorial, just understand some of the numbers that I might possibly throw out are going to vary depending on your individual image, okay? So I'm going to do file open, just like any other thing. We're going to open that image originally. So football practice image.jpg, we're going to open it. And then we're going to zoom in so we can make sure that it is full scale and I can see every bit of detail for this image. The big thing I need to recognize, again, this is a football image that has the subject as a clear focus. Whatever image you go with, I recommend, if it has a kind of mild background, aka not a lot of stuff going on, it's going to be easier on you. The issue you're going to see when I go into image threshold is that because there are arms back here, because there's a busy background, it's going to make it a little bit tougher for me to kind of differentiate between where his foreground is and where the background is. So I mentioned image threshold, right? So the idea is that we're going to take a photograph like this, and we need to convert it. We need to turn it into a two-color image, right? So instead of being a full-color photograph, we're going to go up to image. Last week we talked about mode. This week we're actually going to go into adjustments, right? So image adjustments, and we're going to go into threshold. So you can see all of these different types of adjustments. If you want to play around them with them kind of on your own time, you can see that basically image adjustments are adjustments to the whole image. So we could change something such as like how much shadows are in the picture with like levels and curves. If we're trying to increase like how much brightness is going on with the highlights. If we're trying to change maybe like the vibrance of the picture, if we're trying to change it to a black and white photo, if we wanted to change it by inverting the colors, if we want to posterize it for this project, right, we're going to deal with threshold. So image adjustments and threshold is what we're looking at. Notice once I click it, we're going to get two things. First, notice that the image turns again to a black and white image. So no longer do we have black, white, grays, all the different colors. We just have black and white. It's on or it's off, right? We also get this little threshold menu right here, right? And so we see this kind of histogram. If you've taken photo 1 or photo 2, you've possibly dealt with the kind of histogram style of like levels and curves. And it's kind of similar. With this image, you can see we can adjust the threshold. All the way to the left is increasing it so that it is a brighter image. all the way to the right is going to make it a darker image. Clearly, we don't want to go all the way to the left or right because that takes away all of the detail and makes the photo literally just a black image or a white image. What we want, right, for this to work out in our favor is we want detail in the person's or the subject's face, right? We want all the detail, but we also want a rough guide around the person. And so if you look at that example, right, of the Marilyn Monroe piece, the reason that we want that kind of clear ability of seeing the outline of the person is because you're painting that, right? So you're going to be having to go around the person and paint, which means you need to recognize where the person ends and where the back or the background begins, right? So if you go too far to the right, you lose a lot of detail in the person. Right, you get all the shadows, but you lose a lot of the detail, but you're able to typically maybe see a little bit more of like the outline of the person, right? If you go too far to the left, you get all of the details, but the background gets washed out and you kind of lose your ability to be able to kind of trace around the person. So for this, I'm going to go find somewhere kind of in the 90 range because that's the best sweet point for this image. For yours, it's going to be different. You really would just want to be able to, again, see the outline that you can follow along and paint around them. So find that sweet spot for you for this image. It's about 93, anywhere in the 90s kind of range, right? I could play around with this a little bit and you can see like realistically anywhere between this is going to be just how much detail do I want to keep and lose, okay? So I'm going to keep it at 93. I'm going to click OK. So something to think about with image adjustments is that they are permanent destructive changes, which means that doing that threshold means that this image now is a two-color image, black and white. It is no longer a photograph that has all that detail. So if you don't like the outlook, if you don't like the way that it looks right now, Command Z to undo it and go back in image adjustments and threshold and find that right balance. If you don't like the way it looks, you can see the preview here, but if like you catch it right then and there, you're like, I don't like this, let me start back. Command Z, just start it fresh from threshold. Because after a certain point, you're not going to be able to go backwards in this project. So I'll leave it at 94 just for this one, right? All right, next up, right? If you look at any of the examples on the Marilyn Monroe example, you'll see that he uses a lot of vibrant colors. And so we're going to also choose some vibrant colors. So for this piece, let's go ahead and choose our two colors. I'm going to choose, first off, kind of a purple. I'm going to choose kind of a bright purple right here. And then to be able to choose my second color, right, most likely what you see right here is black and white, or whatever colors you previously used for your black and white to color photo. And so I'm going to choose purple. To be able to get that secondary color to be a second loaded up paint color, we need to hit X on our keyboard or click the little double arrow and be able to swap the color. Whatever you choose as your color is going to place itself in that foreground color, right? So right now with white on top, if I were to go down here and find this kind of greenish blue, notice that places itself in whatever the foreground color was, okay? So I want two colors loaded up. Let me go ahead and say for the white, I'm going to do green. And then for the background that I'm going to paint around him, I'm going to have as the purple for this initial image, okay? So to be able to select the white, right, we want to be able to use the magic wand tool, right? So if you remember back from the sandwich project, we used selection tools. So we want to select the white in this image by using the magic wand tool, because the magic wand tool lets you select an individual color range really, really well, right? So magic wand, if I click in this open white space, notice the dancing ants appear, but it doesn't appear everywhere in the image, right? Because the white in this image is not connected in every single part of this image, right? It only connects kind of where all those gaps kind of open up. So it misses a lot of stuff. So if I tried to fill in, right, the white space right now, it would only grab some of it. Okay, so to be able to grab all of the white on this image, I can go up here to select, right, the select menu at the very top of Photoshop, and I can do select similar. It's exactly like it sounds. It's going to select all of the similar color you've got currently selected. Because I chose white, that means it's going to find all of the white, all of the similar colors that are around this image, right? So now if I were to do fill, which if you look down at your keyboard, you can fill kind of like a paint bucket, right? You can fill by doing Alt and backspace. Okay, and so if you do Alt backspace, it's going to fill it with that foreground color. Notice I accidentally did Command backspace because my keyboard at home, right? So Command backspace fills it with the background color. Alt backspace fills it with the foreground color. Okay, so Command backspace, you can see it fills with that purple. Alt backspace is going to fill with that green. Okay, notice that because it chose all of the white that was around here, it filled all of that white with select similar with that individual color. Okay, once you have your color chosen, cool, Command D to deselect. You can also do select deselect, right? It's the same as the shortcut. That's going to get rid of your dancing ants and let you move on to the next portion. Okay, next part up is that we want to use our brush tool. Okay, we saw in the black and white to color project last week, right? We chose our brush tool. We used our brush tool a lot. And we wanted to make sure that, of course, our hardness is set to at 100%. We don't want a fuzzy kind of airbrushy style brush, even for this project as well, okay? It serves its purpose in some other things if we're trying to do kind of airbrush style or spray paint, but for this purpose and for a lot of stuff we typically want a hard 100% hardness brush. Again, we also talked about last week being able to make our brush bigger or smaller, right? So if you look at your keyboard, the right bracket will make it bigger, the left bracket will make it smaller. But here's the deal. The brush paints with the foreground color. So we don't want to paint right now because if we paint, it's just going to add the green, right? If we look at the example of Marilyn Monroe, we need the purple, which means we need to swap those colors by hitting the little double arrow or by hitting X on the keyboard. Okay, so load up your secondary paint, and then with your paintbrush, you can see that it's going to paint with that purple. Okay, the next part, I'm going to want to zoom in so that I can see the silhouette as I draw and trace around this person. My style and technique for this project most of the time is always going to be recommended that you go with a small brush and that you're zoomed in so that you can go and you can paint around the person. Okay. My recommendation also is this. If you make a mistake, if you accidentally go too much in and you cut off a part of the person, Command Z in the moment, look and be actively aware as you're painting because if you accidentally do it, you can only come back at that point. And it's because if you look, you're painting directly on the person, right? You're painting directly on this background image. Unlike with the black and white to color photo project, you're not painting on new layers. You're painting on the original image. You're doing a lot of destructive editing, but we're also creating art in a different kind of way. So we're going to have to paint directly on the photo for this. So just make sure that if you accidentally take away a part of the person, that you bring it back, that you don't take off a chunk of their arm, right? As I go through and as I paint, again, find the right brush size that works for you as you paint, and make sure that you just do it in small, kind of smooth increments, okay? As I go and I paint around this guy, I'm going to go ahead and go into this little crevice and get it because it's a small kind of brush that I need. You want to make sure that it's okay to use your space bar to be able to pan around your image, right? You don't have to zoom out and zoom in all the time. You can be zoomed in and use your space bar to move around your image, okay? So I'm going to Command plus one more time to zoom in. I'm going to make my brush a little bigger now that I've gotten out of that little space. So here's the deal. I know that his helmet, and this is one of the reasons why we wanted to set the threshold at a right balance for your image, right? We need to be able to understand where his helmet ends and where the background ends. So I can guess, just because of the fact that I know kind of the layout of a helmet and how it's looking, right, that realistically his helmet is going to come up, kind of round out right here. And again, it's okay to stop, zoom out for a sec to make sure it's looking fine, right? If you don't like the way it looks, Command Z to undo it. But you can always do this in small bursts to kind of make sure that it's not going to be like, oh crap, I took too much off, right? Or, oh, I didn't take enough off. It's okay to go back and forth and just kind of find that right balance to make sure this is right, especially in this first image, because ultimately, once you get this first image fully painted, all you're doing after the fact, right, is making copies and essentially just filling it in with new colors, right? Using the same techniques we just used, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So I want to make sure that the first image is set up perfectly and looks the best. So I'm going to zoom in again. I'm going to make sure to get his helmet. So here we are, right? Again, no problem at all if you want to try to kind of go back and fix, right, and round out. Just understand that if you don't like the way it looks, then fix it. I think the problem that we look at a lot of the times with, you know, thinking about as artists is if we make a mistake, it's permanently done, and that's usually not the case, right? So here we are. I know his shoulder is pretty much right here. I can kind of see that corner. And so I'm going to go in with a slightly smaller brush just to make sure I can kind of follow that guide around his shoulder. Hold spacebar, move down so I can see the rest of it. So the big thing now, if we look at it, is Command Z to undo that. So if there's a little bits that you want to kind of touch up on, that's great, right? You can see like, all right, cool, there's a little shadow or highlight right there that I missed. I can always go in and kind of smooth it out. If I don't like it, Command Z, again, get comfortable with undoing. It's okay to undo. But smooth everything out the way you want it to be, right? And the whole reason that I typically recommend doing kind of this tracing around them, basically making kind of like a nice clear trace around their head, is because if you look, right, after you get that nice little tracing around them, all you have to do is make a giant brush and you can paint all of the extra bits that was not part of them, right? And so it's easier to do the outside edges without having to worry about anything because all of it's going to get covered up. Who cares? Who cares about how you paint the edge, right? The thing that matters the most is making sure you get them properly outlined so that you don't have to worry about kind of what's being seen and what's not being seen. So here we are. I'm going to move around, make sure everything's there. So right now, right, if we look at our image, we should just have basically three colors going on. The background color, right? The highlight color of what was previously white, and then black, okay? So I typically think that the best way this usually looks is by having three colors going on. You could go and you could change an individual thing to make it the third color, such as like his threes, right? I could go and change his threes to be a third color. I could go and change it to be red, right? Alt, backspace. Make those individual threes be the third color that pops, right? Because if you look at the Warhol example, he uses at least 4 colors minimum typically for each quadrant or each segment, right? You could do that. You also, alternatively, so I'm going to Command Z for a sec to undo that, and Command D to deselect. You could also choose the black of the picture, right? And remember, we want to choose all of the black, so we want to do select similar. That'll grab all of the black that was there. And so we could choose the black and choose a dark third color, right? So let's say, for instance, a dark, we'll go with like a dark orange maybe for this, right? So it's going to be almost like a brownish orange. We could choose a dark orange and do Alt backspace, and that's going to act as the shadow. What you're going to notice is if you try to do a bright color for that shadow, right, for the black, if you try to choose a third color that's bright, it's not going to look good. It's going to take out almost all of your details because if you think about the way that this image works, you have the highlight being the green and the shadow has to be dark. All of the details come down to that contrast between the highlights and the shadows. So whatever color you choose, just understand that you need to keep it kind of similar in regards to the shadows. The black is going to remain the same. It needs to be a dark color. So it doesn't matter what color, right? I could choose blue or purple, right? So I could choose, or even like dark red, right? It's still going to stay within that same vein because it's keeping with the shadows of that image. So Command D to deselect. Notice now, of course, we have our nice, highlights, shadows, and kind of midground with the background. So if you haven't already, if you haven't been doing so already, make sure you save as. We want to keep this as a Photoshop document, so make sure if you notice as you save as, it's going to try to save it as a JPEG. Change that to Photoshop so you have your working layers. Do your first initial, last name, Warhol. If this is the football image, make sure to practice. If it's your actual image, make sure to call it, your Warhol image. But for this one, I'm just going to do practice so you can see it. I'm going to click save, and then I'll save it as a PSD so I can work from there. Okay. After you paint this original image, you don't have to constantly go and do it over and over and over and over and over again. You just need to make sure this first image is initially painted well. So we're going to double click. We're going to unlock this background layer. Notice I have not unlocked this background layer until now. So we're going to keep it as layer 0. Naming doesn't matter for right now. We're going to keep OK. And then what I want you to see is we're going to make duplicates of this. So if you look at the original Warhol image, we need 9 layers, right? We need 9 copies of these. So I'm going to duplicate this 8 more times to be able to have more copies. I can do that by right-clicking on the layer and doing duplicate layer. Notice it's going to say layer 0 copy, right? Click OK. Boom. We've done that, right? Once you right-click and make a copy, you can also notice that there's a shortcut if you want to make a copy by doing Command J. Whatever layer you have selected, if you Command J it, it's going to make a copy of that as well, right? So right now I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We have 9 copies of this image. Okay, we'll get back to renaming it in just a second. But the one thing I want you to now see is we're going to go change the canvas size of this image so that we can have a 9-piece square kind of portrait. Okay, so we're going to go up here in Photoshop. If you look, we're going to go to image. We're going to go to canvas size. In image and canvas size, what I want you to see first and foremost is you need to click on pixels and change it to %. And so let's think about it, okay? This image is 100% both ways, width and height. And so to be able to make a 9-segment canvas, we need it to go, if this is 100%, we need it to go 300% width-wise, right, to have 3 times the size. We also need it to go 3 times or 300% in regards to the vertical space or the height. So we're going to change 100 to 300. We're going to change height to 300. Again, both percents. And then click OK. I'm going to zoom out with Command minus, right? Or Command 0 to be able to see the full size. And what you see is that you have 9 copies because you made previously 9 copies, right? All of these 9 copies are in the center of this canvas, okay? If we look now, we need to use our move tool to be able to move each copy to their own place, okay? So because you made it 300%, that means they all are equally sized, and this canvas is literally just 300% as big vertically and horizontally, right? So I'm moving each individual layer just kind of to its own placement on the grid. And then so we'll have 9 copies of this guy, right? What I now recommend is double clicking on each layer, right, and naming it what it is. So this piece right here is the middle. We can see the preview icon right there. So middle. All right, we can see this one is the bottom right. So I'll say bottom right. This one is the bottom left. Bottom left. This one's the center left. Or sorry, center middle. By center middle, I mean bottom middle. It's one of those days. And by middle, I could do middle, center, whichever, right? This is going to be the left middle. This is going to be the right middle. This is going to be the top right. middle top or top middle, again, kind of how you want to handle that, and then left top or top left. Okay. So that just lets us know which one's which. Again, you're dealing with 9 layers, so that gets confusing. You're dealing with 9 layers of the exact same guy repeated over and over. And so it's going to be really important of which person do you have clicked on. Okay. So here's the deal. Okay. You have made the selections of painting and doing everything already. The hard work is past you. At this point, what we want to look at is we want to just change the colors, right? And so that means let's choose this top left guy as an example. If I zoom in for a sec to him, so top left, right, this guy right here, with that layer selected, that means all I need to do is use my magic wand, select the brights, aka for instance this green, do select similar, right? Notice that when I do select similar, it's going to grab all the green that was in this image, right? And now I just choose a different color. And that's it, right? So what you will note is because of the way this green was selected, it didn't grab everything, right? And sometimes what we see with the magic wand is the tolerance is automatically set to 32%. So I'm going to Command D for a sec. I want you to see something. So Command D, I'm going to change this tolerance to a lower number. So let me go with 10. Hit enter. Okay. Now if I try to choose the green and I do select similar, I want you to see kind of what happens. Notice that it chose and picked up even less. You can see giant chunks that it missed, right? So the tolerance that we look at for the magic wand, the larger the number, the wider the number. So let's go above 32, right? Let's go to 50. Enter. Command D to deselect. I'm going to choose my green. I'm going to do select similar now. Notice now it grabs a lot more of those individual pieces. So the lower the number for the tolerance, the lower the tolerance that you're allowing. The higher the number, the higher tolerance you're allowing, aka the more you're allowing in your selection. Okay, so if it's a lower tolerance, that means you're selecting less. You are allowing less to be selected. But if you have a higher tolerance, just like if you had a higher tolerance, for anything, you'd be more willing to be able to select that. So you can bump that tolerance up to anything you want. So if you wanted to go to 70, you can try to bump that up, reselect, select similar, and see if we can grab a lot more of that green. Depending, right, it may miss some bits and pieces, and if that's the case, it's fine, right? It doesn't have to be exactly perfect, but if you did want to go and select more, you could also be able to hold shift and add to your selection. Notice the magic wand gets a little plus sign, so you can go in, and if you wanted, you could then select individual pieces that it misses, right? So shift, and then you're able to select individual pieces that it just kind of misses. Okay, so here we are. We've got this green. We want to change it to a different color. Let's choose, for instance, a kind of bright, maybe a Carolina-ish blue. Alt backspace is all I have to do to fill it in, right? Command D to deselect. Same deal for the background, right? I select the background. For this picture, the background's all one piece, so all I have to do is click it. I did blue, so I can do like a yellow, maybe a yellowish orange, right? Alt backspace, fill that in. And then for my third color, if I want, remember I could choose the purple. Select similar. Don't forget that if you're choosing a space such as your highlights, or if you're choosing your shadows, you need to be able to select similar and grab everything that was within that realm. Notice I still have my tolerance up, so I probably want to back down a little bit on that just because I don't need to select as much. I could probably go back to 32. Select similar. But I still need to keep a dark color, right? So I've got orange, I've got blue. I could go with maybe a dark green. And Command D, and there we go, right? So we have one of our 9 now chosen. If you think about it, you've already got 1 done because you did the first one. You've got the second one, so now we only have 7 left to go. Okay, and so it's just that same process. If I chose my top right, I just need to click on the top right layer, and then to be able to select, it's the same thing, right? Select the background, select the shadows, the highlights, and just change the colors. That's all you're doing at this point out. So the hard part is way past you. So for this one, I'll finish this one and then I'll close down the video. I'm going to choose a bright red, Alt backspace, right? I'm going to choose the green. I'm going to do select similar. And then for this one, since I did red, let me do kind of this like greenish yellow. I think that'll be pretty cool. Alt backspace, right? Fill that in. And then for the shadows, select, and then select similar. And let me choose, let me do kind of like a dark orange, almost like a brown. Alt backspace, okay? And so we start to wind up already creating what is our masterpiece, right? I'm going to Command S to save because I want to make sure I'm saving my work, obviously pretty often. But ultimately, you want to change all 9 of them so that you are winding up with a piece that looks similar to this, right? Similar to Warhol style. Whatever the case is, just make sure that you have fun with it. It's a fun project. It's something that's pretty cool to walk away with as a piece of your Photoshop portfolio. And outside of that, if you have any questions, as always, feel free to reach out to me during class, as well as on Slack or an email. But no matter what, I hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you guys so much for tuning in.